foreign-born players at the Rugby World Cup 2019. It's a bit of a controversial topic at times. Augustine Pichot likes to talk about it a fair bit. Ireland has been his latest target in terms of picking a player not born in Ireland. But yeah, the numbers are out as to how the squads are made up and how many foreign-born players are in each squad. If the numbers is pretty much all you're after, I'll skip to this time, and that'll just be where we get into the numbers. I'll still talk a little bit about some of the areas that are a bit grey despite the numbers. But yeah, before I get into the numbers, for those of you who are willing to stick around for a second, I will say that this is really a hot button issue in rugby. I did a video on the November squads last year for how many players were foreign born. I did all the research myself for that one, so it was a bit of a mission, Wikipedia and player profiles, news articles and whatnot. And that to this day, despite the fact that my channel's grown a lot since then, it remains my #1 viewed video. So a lot of people are interested in this. People who might not follow Super Rugby or the Pro 14 or the Champions Cup or whatever, but they are interested in the number of foreign-born players. It just seems to be a thing. After I did that video last year, Augustine Pichot managed to get the stats. I think a news article reported on the stats, and then he tweeted those numbers, and it was all a big hoo-ha. So I feel like you do need to take a little bit of context when looking at foreign-born players, because just where you're born doesn't define anybody. I've got 2 kids, and they were born in 2 different countries. So life happens, and people sometimes are born in different places. That being said, there are players who move to countries with the specific purpose of playing rugby. So I think there's, yeah, that's part of the reason that people get a bit upset, I guess, is because, you know, you see squads and you think it's a bunch of mercenaries rather than guys actually playing for that country. We all like to believe that, you know, the squads are made up of proud people. Ideally, if they're born in that country, raised in that country, represent that country, that's ideal. But again, life happens, and it's not always that simple. And again, I mean, like, you've got examples like Ireland is complex. The UK is a bunch of places that are on one passport that can move freely, and your parents are born in Wales and then they move to England to get jobs and have kids there. It's military, parents are based all over the shop, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, these numbers are pretty much just looking at where they were born. I didn't do the research for this one this time. It's on an article from AmericaRugbyNews.com, which I will link to in the description if you guys want to have a look at the full details. It's really good work, and there's lots of thorough detail there, more than what I got when I did it myself last year. So yeah, credit to whoever put in all this time and effort to, I didn't see an author's name at the bottom of the article, but whoever did this, it's top work. And it shows trends differing from country to country. Like, there's economic trends, I think you can kind of see from here, you know, trends in immigration and whatnot. But ultimately, all we're looking at is who was born where. And this person's done a bit of looking at where they were raised as well, so that's also going to make things a little bit interesting. Start down to the numbers. So 3 countries have 100% locally born and raised teams. Those countries are Namibia, Argentina, and Uruguay. I'm no expert on economies, but I'm not sure how much Namibia, Argentina, and Uruguay get in terms of immigration, what their birth rate is like, all these kind of things. But I know New Zealand has a lot of immigration, so yeah, that's maybe a factor as to why these teams are 100% local. Maybe not. But interestingly, within those 3 teams, which are 100%, it does get a little bit grey in that for Namibia, several of those players have had their junior careers in South Africa. So South Africa has to get a little bit of credit for the development of those players. So despite the fact that they're 100% born, a little bit has to go through to South Africa for helping out. 2 countries have just the 1 foreign-born player. That's Georgia and South Africa. But if you look at these 2 guys, and there's a little bit more information on their kind of profiles, the Georgian guy is a little bit more Georgian than the South African guy is South African. I'll explain that, because Merab Sharekadze was born in Russia to Georgian parents and they returned to Tbilisi in Georgia, pretty much straight after he was born. It doesn't get a lot more Georgian than that, other than that he wasn't born in Georgia. Whereas for Tendai Ntawira, born in Zimbabwe, I believe he was raised in Zimbabwe, played for Zimbabwe under 18s, and yet eventually made his way to South Africa, and now he's a Springbok kind of legend. So their stats are the same, 97% to 3% local to foreign, but those guys' path to that national team are quite different. Russia has 2 guys who were born abroad, one in Azerbaijan back when it was the USSR, so that's a political thing, and one in the Ukraine, and again moved back to Russia when he was an infant. So 94% local, 6% foreign, and they're pretty local as far as you'd look at their histories. New Zealand actually comes in next with 3 foreign-born players, making 87% local, 13% foreign. That's Ofatu'ungafasi and Nepo Laulala. Both of them came to New Zealand in their early teens. I think Ofatu'ungafasi was like 14. He ended up going to high school, becoming the head boy of his high school. So his New Zealand experience was relatively lengthy. He would have learned most of his rugby here, you would have thought, if he's age 14 when he got here. Sever Reese came on a high school scholarship, age 17. And that happens a fair bit. So it's interesting that New Zealand is often the one that gets a bit of stick for having so many imported players. I think people who haven't been here maybe don't understand how big our Pacific and Māori population is. Like, I live in Auckland, which is the biggest city in New Zealand. It's got a quarter of the population, and 25% of our population here in Auckland is Pacific Island or Māori. So it's a lot of people, and a lot of them play rugby. I would say proportionally more of them play rugby than Caucasians. So probably, I don't know, that's just kind of anecdotal stuff, but I've been to club rugby and it just seems to be a thing. That being said, the numbers have shifted because Luke Jacobson, who's a New Zealand-born guy, has gone out of the squad with concussion symptoms, and the guy they've brought in, Shannon Frizzell, born and raised in Tonga. So that shifts New Zealand from 90-10 to 87-13. And he's legit, like, I think didn't leave Tonga until after he was able to vote kind of age. So, yeah, probably came to New Zealand on rugby contract. I'm not exactly sure the details of him, but I know he played sports at a competitive level in like under 18s, under 20s for Tonga. So, yeah, so that shifts New Zealand into the same bracket as Canada and Fiji. Canada and Fiji also that split with 4 foreign-born players, 87-13 in the percentages. For Fiji, though, it's a little bit different in that all of the guys who qualify for Fiji, it's through a Fijian parent. That's Ma'afu, the 2 Matavesi brothers, and Volavola. According to the article, Volavola actually spent some of his childhood in Fiji growing up, so he's got more of a connection to Fiji than perhaps just having his parents born there. Whereas you look at the Canadian squad, you got 1 through a grandparent, 2 through residency, and 1 through a direct parent. So, yeah, I guess that's just a little bit of a shift. France also had 4 players born overseas, in Leroux, Gitoun, Vakatawa and Raka, and all 4 born in different countries. Raka was born in Fiji, Vakatawa in New Zealand, although I think he grew up in Fiji, Leroux, South Africa, and Gitoun in Algeria. I mean, Gitoun's been in France, I think, the majority of his life. The other guys all qualifying through residency. And France seemingly has had a bit of a push to reduce the number of foreign guys in their squad with that rule about, you know, having to have a French passport. So, you know, the top 14 has a lot of foreign-born players, and eventually, if they haven't been capped, they would be eligible for France. But I mean, it's probably, I think, a move that most fans would say is a good one for the game to try and increase the number of local players playing for the French team. Ireland, the guys who were under the gun from Augustin Pichot, they come in with 5 foreign-born players, 84%, 16% is the split in the percentages. So you got 2 South Africans in John Klein and CJ Stander. You got 2 New Zealanders in Carberry and Aki, and 1 Canadian in Luke McGrath. But you look at McGrath and Carberry, both grew up in Ireland from their childhood, so good luck trying to tell them they're not Irish. Klein, Stander, and Aki, though, were more of those came to Ireland to play rugby and eventually had their sights set on the national team. So through residency. And that, I think, with the change to make it 5 years is probably going to be a good thing for the game. We will get more guys hopefully through who are kind of domestic products of their own team. Next, you get into England, who kind of like New Zealand often get a bit of stick for the amount of foreign-born players they've got. But how fair is it? 6 players foreign-born, so 81 and 19% is the split for them. The Vunipola brothers are the guys who get the main kind of focus, but they've been in New Zealand. I mean, not New Zealand. They're born in New Zealand, or at least Mako was. Billy was born in Australia, but they've been in England for such a long time. Qualified via residency in 2008. So very, very long time ago. Hines is kind of the only one that you look at and go, yeah, he moved there as an adult and, you know, qualifies through a grandparent. Tuilangi residency since 2007. Whakanasinga residency since 2003. So, yeah, I think for the most part, these guys have all come to England in their pre-adult years and learned the trade in England. So that's just a fact of life with immigration. Wales and Italy both have 8 players not born locally, but if you look at the way those guys have qualified, it is quite different for Wales, and it's probably a symptom of being part of the UK, which is just the way it works. 7 of their 8 foreign players are born in England, and a lot of them have got Welsh parents who just happened to be in the UK when they had children. George North is a perfect example. Try to tell that guy he's not Welsh. But yeah, you do look at Hadley Parkes as probably the exception there. He's born in New Zealand, qualified purely through residency, just having played rugby long enough in Wales. All the other guys, Helen Maymas, Jonathan Davis, George North, Shingler, raised in Wales, having moved there as children. Moriarty, born in England, mostly raised in Wales. So, again, pretty Welsh for foreigners if you're just going by place of birth. Italy, a wee bit different with their 8. You got Parise, who moved to Italy at age 17, so that's kind of young enough that you would generally say he's grown up at least part of his life there, but a fair few people who are related to Italy through some kind of grandparent. That's Polledri, grandparent, Brayley, grandparent, Cici and Negri through their parents, born in Germany and Zimbabwe. But, yeah, you got guys like Stain and Hayward, who is, again, purely there through having played rugby in Italy long enough. Same with Dean Budd as well. Australia comes in next, and it's a wee bit of a jump from 8 to 12. So your percentage shifts from up to 61 to 39 is the split between locally and foreign-born. Interestingly, with Australia, they've all qualified through residency. There's not one grandparent, parent, or whatever to be seen. However, of these 12, 10 of them were raised in Australia to some kind of degree. Like you look at Tonulatu, qualified residency 1998, Liliafano 1997, born in New Zealand. Kurandrani even since 2010, it's quite a long time ago. Karevi 2004, Dana Halapeti 2003 from South Africa. So I think that just highlights Papua New Guinea to Wilguinea 2003. It highlights the immigration that happened in Australia. A lot of people moved to Australia, and some of them go on to play rugby. It's probably disproportionately high, but maybe the locals go and play Aussie rules or league. Who knows? USA is one step higher with 13, so the split 59%, 41%. A fair few parents and grandparents here, but some of them residency, and a couple of the guys, I didn't know this when I did my American preview, but like a couple of South African guys moved to the USA age 10 and 11, so that makes you pretty American in most people's books. Some of them, and it seems to be a common theme with America and Japan actually, went to America for higher education and ended up playing rugby. So you're looking at Davis, Fawcett, McGinty, Mullen, all these guys did some kind of higher study in the USA. So yeah, it's just, again, it's a thing about the way the world works. America has a lot of top universities and good schools, so the fact that people go there to study is kind of not all that surprising. More people go to the USA to study than New Zealand, that is for sure. Next, you jump up to Scotland, and Scotland's the last team where you can claim more than half the squad was born locally. They're at 14 players. born abroad, so it's 55% local, 45% foreign. Again, it's partly with the UK being the way it is that you have that split with a lot of guys born in England, but also New Zealand as well, Australia. A lot of people qualifying through a parent or grandparent seems to be a thing for Scotland. And then again, you got the likes of Nell, who qualified, through residency, Sam Johnson through residency, but pretty much everyone else has some direct family connection to Scotland. John Buckley was born abroad but moved back to Scotland at 7. Duncan Taylor was born... actually, it doesn't say here, but it says he was schooled in multiple countries, including Scotland. So the fact that he plays for Scotland is kind of no big surprise. Now we get to the teams whose selection is more foreign-born players than local. Japan, the hosts, it's only marginal. 16 foreign-born players makes it 48%, 52% being the number of foreign-born players. But as I said, like with America, a large theme around education. So all of these guys except Matsushima qualified through residency. Some of them quite some time ago. You look at Michael Leach, Moakiola, Nakajima, Valu, Ku. All these guys moved to Japan at 14 or 15. That's a long time. I know they don't look Japanese. I guess Japan doesn't get as much immigration as some other countries, so it's perhaps not as diverse in its ethnic makeup. So when you see its rugby team being less than 50%, that riles some people up for sure. But if you've been there since 14 or 15, that's quite a good portion of your life if you're like a 25-year-old or 30-year-old rugby player. Hendrik Tui also attended university from 19 years old. Rafaele Mafi also went and did higher education studies in Japan. So you still do have you guys who you might classify as kind of a mercenary, like Lapis Lapaskakni, Van der Walt, these guys who have basically just been playing rugby in Japan long enough to qualify. But it's not only made up of that kind of player. The final two, you've got Samoa, whose split is 18 foreign-born players, so 42% local, 58 foreign. And interestingly, every one of them except Kieran Fonatia qualifies through a parent. Fonatia is through a grandparent. All of the rest of them, parents, and the majority of them born in New Zealand. So Ala Alatoa, Tole Afoa, and Seutini were born in Australia. All the other guys were born in New Zealand. So some of them played New Zealand Sevens and New Zealand Under-20s. But yeah, a lot of them born in New Zealand. And interestingly, it says of Samoa's 14 players born in Samoa, many of them moved to Australia or New Zealand as children. So this is your 42% that were actually born in Samoa. A lot of them were raised outside of Samoa. And they said if you just count the ones who were born, raised, learned their trade in Samoa, it's 3 players. So a large kind of foreign influence on that Samoan squad. But yeah, I guess a lot of guys in Australia and New Zealand with that Samoan connection. And lastly, at the top of the list is Tonga. Tonga has 19 foreign-born players, so it is 39% local, 61% foreign. Again, New Zealand is the #1 place that these guys were born. Apart from Mafi and Hingano, all the rest of their guys were born in New Zealand, and every single one of them is eligible through a Tongan parent, without any exception. You got a lot of guys who played New Zealand Under-20s, Under-21s, Sevens. Kupavuna even played for Australia. I think he had to go through the Olympic loophole to get back to playing for Tonga. So, yeah, there's a huge New Zealand influence on that Tongan squad. It says, careful analysis of where these players were raised and where they played the rugby determines that Tonga's roster has 9 homegrown players. So if you look at that, it's actually more than Samoa. But yeah, definitely big New Zealand connection for that Tongan squad. So yeah, there's a big Pacific Island population in New Zealand. It is true. If you look at all the total all these numbers up, where are all these players born? Is there a theme? There's a definite theme. I mean, there's a bunch of countries with one: Algeria, Ukraine, Scotland, Argentina, Germany, Hong Kong, Papua New Guinea, Russia, Canada, Azerbaijan. All had one player at the World Cup who was born in that country representing another country. USA's got 2. Samoa has 3. Zimbabwe also has 3. It's a pity those guys aren't at Rugby World Cups anymore. Fiji has 7, which is one more than Ireland with 6. Tonga has 8. So interestingly, of those 3 kind of Pacific islands, Tonga is the number 1. I felt like Samoa would have been higher, but that's just the way it is. Not necessarily higher than Tonga, but higher than 3. Australia, big jump up there to 13. South Africa 15. England 18. I guess supplying a fair few to Wales and to Scotland, and then New Zealand 53. 53 players born in New Zealand, not necessarily all raised in New Zealand, but born in New Zealand who will represent a country other than New Zealand at the Rugby World Cup. So, kind of make of this what you will. Like I said, you got to take things into account that people move around, people have kids in multiple places, people leave poorer countries to go to more affluent countries, people work in places where the money is better. People leave for political reasons. There's all kinds of stuff going on. I think most of us will be pretty happy that the residency rules switch to 5 years soon, because that really shows a bit more of a commitment to a country than just 3 years. 3 years is a pretty short time. But yeah, you guys let me know your thoughts on these numbers. Did you think any squad was higher than you predicted, or particularly lower? How do you feel about so many New Zealand guys playing for other countries? Do you think just because your parent is from a country that should qualify you? I know some people do really value the bloodline. Some people value more the time you've spent in that country. Like I know some people with Brad Shields don't like him because he doesn't speak with an English accent. How much does he know about that kind of thing? I don't know. I'm not going to get into the nuts and bolts of it. But yeah, you guys do let me know your thoughts, and I will talk to you again soon. See you later.